They sold my car, family comes first. Be grateful we let you live here, he said. Then he added, oh, and your brother's starting college. You'll cover his first semester, $5,800, due this week. I said, no way. He snapped, then pack your things, you're dead to me. So I left. That night, I purposely left something behind. This morning they found it. Now my aunt is crying, my uncle is screaming, and my dad's out on the porch begging the neighbors for help. This story, it starts with a wound so deep, so profoundly unfair, it changed the entire course of my life. Can you imagine on your 25th birthday, while busting your butt at a double shift, getting a text that rips away everything you've sacrificed for? That's exactly what happened to me, and the bitter taste of that betrayal still lingers. I'm Olivia, and for as long as I can remember, my life has been a relentless uphill climb. Since I was 16, I'd been working, scraping, saving, all just to put myself through college while still living under my parents' roof. That day was my birthday, and I was deep into a grueling double shift at the diner, just trying to make ends meet. Then, my phone buzzed. It was Dad. The text flashed, cold and dismissive. We sold your car. Family comes first. Be grateful we let you live here. My car. The one I'd poured 3 years of my life into saving for, every single penny, earned with my own sweat and tears, and titled squarely in my name. What I didn't know then was that this gut-wrenching betrayal was just the beginning, a shocking turning point that would force me to confront a truth I'd been avoiding for far too long. Growing up in the Henderson household was like walking a tightrope over broken glass, especially around my father, Robert. He was a sales manager at a local furniture store, and that position seemed to fuel an iron-fisted need for control over everything at home, our finances, our schedules, even our most personal possessions. My mother, Diana, a part-time receptionist, enabled him with her quiet compliance, always ready with some variation of, that's just how your father shows love. And then there was my younger brother, Jake, 18 and the undisputed golden child. Jake never had to lift a finger during high school. His focus needed to be on his grades, a pathway to some grand university. His room was a shrine to privilege, gaming consoles, designer sneakers, the latest iPhone, all gifts from parents who insisted he needed these things to fit in and succeed. My own journey began at 16 at Mabel's Diner. Weekend shifts quickly morphed into almost full-time hours by my senior year. What I hoped would be a step towards independence quickly became an expected contribution to family expenses. Dad even demanded I pay $400 a month in rent to live in my own childhood bedroom while attending community college. You need to learn responsibility, he'd lecture, pocketing my hard-earned cash. Community college wasn't my first choice, not by a long shot. I'd been accepted to State University with a partial scholarship, but Dad had swept in, convincing me it was financially irresponsible to take on student loans. You're better off staying home, saving money, and helping the family, he'd insisted, while simultaneously encouraging Jake to apply to prestigious, expensive private universities across the country. Saving for that car had been my singular obsession for 3 years. I picked up every extra shift imaginable, sold clothes online, even donated plasma twice a month. Every single dollar went into a savings account I'd open the day I turned 18. Dad, of course, insisted on being a cosigner, just in case. I now see that as his first calculated move to seize control of my financial future. When I finally hit $8,200, I found a reliable used Toyota Corolla. Driving it home was one of the proudest moments of my life. Dad had come along to make sure you don't get ripped off, but I handled all the negotiations myself. The car was legally titled in my name, though Dad insisted on keeping copies of all the paperwork for the family files. This pattern, where my parents claimed my possessions for the family, wasn't new. My high school graduation money from relatives mysteriously funded a family vacation. My first big bonus check from the diner disappeared into a water heater replacement. Each time, the message was painfully clear: my achievements and possessions weren't truly mine. I wrestled with a swirling mix of guilt for wanting my own life and seething resentment for being exploited. Mom would always chime in with her well-worn mantra, family sacrifices for each other. Whenever I dared to question these arrangements, the underlying message was loud and clear. My resistance meant I didn't love them enough. My 20th birthday had started with a quiet, fragile excitement. I'd planned to treat myself to dinner at my favorite Thai restaurant after my double shift. Amanda, my closest friend at the diner, had promised cupcakes during our break. Small celebrations, yes, but they were mine. I'd even splurged on a new dress from the clearance rack to wear after work. The only family member who truly understood or supported me was Aunt Linda, my father's sister. Unlike Dad, she championed independence and education. She'd even tried to help me financially for university, but Dad had intercepted her offer, branding it interference. Still, she remained my confidant, sending birthday cards with small cash gifts directly to my workplace, ensuring they wouldn't be redistributed by my parents. Mom's brother, Uncle Thomas, a successful accountant, had also witnessed our family's twisted dynamics over the years. He distanced himself from our household after countless arguments with Dad about financial matters. Uncle Thomas maintained a polite relationship, mostly through holiday gatherings. He'd pulled me aside last Christmas, his voice a low whisper, "Something about your father's financial discussions doesn't add up. Do you need help setting up independent accounts?" Before Dad swooped in and abruptly ended our conversation. That birthday morning, I'd left early for my 7 a.m. shift, carefully avoiding waking anyone. Mom had promised a small family dinner that evening, though past birthdays had usually been overshadowed by Jake's latest achievement or Dad's work stress. Still, I'd held onto a sliver of hope that this year might be different. I locked the front door behind me and walked to my car, parked on the street. The early October air had a crisp, invigorating bite as I slid behind the wheel, turning the key in the ignition of the vehicle that represented my small, precious piece of independence. I had no idea it would be the last time I would ever drive it. The lunch rush at Mabel's diner finally subsided, and I took my break at 2:30. My feet ached from 7 hours of nonstop movement, but I still had 5 more hours to go on my double shift. Amanda had decorated the break room with a single, slightly deflated happy birthday balloon and presented me with a chocolate cupcake, topped with a sparkler candle. "Make a wish, birthday girl," she chirped, her blonde ponytail bouncing as she clapped. I closed my eyes, wishing for the courage to finally move out on my own, then blew out the tiny flame. As Amanda cut the cupcake to share, my phone vibrated in my apron pocket. The text from Dad was a punch to the gut. "We sold your car this morning. Got $4,000 cash. Family comes first. Be grateful we let you live here." I stared at the screen, my mind refusing to process the words, certain I'd misread. My fingers trembled as I typed back, "What are you talking about? That's my car. I paid for it." His response came instantly, cutting through me like a knife. "Your brother got accepted to Preston University. He starts next semester. Tuition deposit was due." My stomach clenched, and another text followed, dripping with an icy expectation. "Oh, and for your brother's starting college, you'll cover his first semester. $5,800 due this week." "Dad, that's not possible. The car is in my name. How could you even sell it?" I typed, my voice rising enough that Amanda looked up with genuine concern. "We handled the paperwork." "Family emergency clause," came his cryptic, infuriating reply. A third message appeared, cementing the utter injustice. "Your mother and I have supported you for years. Time to support your brother's future." I called him immediately, stepping outside the diner's back door despite the biting cold. He answered on the 4th ring. "You can't do this." I choked out, my voice trembling. "That car is legally mine. I worked for it, I paid for it. The title is in my name." "The title had me as co-signer for emergencies," Dad replied, his voice unnervingly calm. "And this is an emergency. Jake needs this money for his education. Your car was just sitting there depreciating. It made financial sense. You sold my car for $4,000? It's worth at least $7,000. I protested, recalling the Kelly Blue Book value I'd checked just last month. The buyer was doing us a favor with cash. "No questions asked," Dad dismissed, as if he were discussing a minor inconvenience. "Besides, you still owe us more for Jake's first semester." Better start picking up extra shifts. I am not paying for Jake's college. I finally shouted into the phone, years of suppressed anger erupting. I've been saving that money for my own tuition, to finish my degree. Dad's voice turned arctic, chilling me to the bone. Family comes first, Olivia. Your mother and I sacrificed everything for you kids. Now it's your turn. The call ended abruptly, leaving me gasping for air in the dim alley behind the diner. My car gone. The independence it represented, gone. And now, they expected thousands more. I leaned against the brick wall, scenes flashing through my memory. The plasma donation center where the nurses knew me by name. The endless Saturday double shifts when my friends were off on weekend trips. The coins I collected in a jar labeled car fund, that I'd count obsessively each night. 3 years of sacrifice, erased in a single morning, without my knowledge or consent. When I returned to the break room, Amanda took one look at my tear-streaked face and sat beside me. What happened? She asked, pushing a glass of water toward me. Through tears, I explained the whole gut-wrenching situation. Amanda's expression shifted from confusion to pure outrage. They can't do that, she exclaimed. That's theft. Did you call the police? The thought hadn't even occurred to me. Could I report my own parents? Should I? Would the police even take it seriously, or would they just dismiss it as a family matter? I need to call my mom, I said instead, dialing with shaking fingers. Mom answered with her typical distracted tone. Olivia, I'm busy preparing for tonight. Jake's friends are coming over to celebrate his acceptance. Mom, did you know Dad sold my car? I asked directly, cutting through her cheerful facade. A pause. Then, it was necessary, honey. Jake's future depends on this. You know how prestigious Preston is. They only accepted 90 students from our state. But it was my car, I repeated, a desperate plea, wondering why this simple fact seemed impossible for them to acknowledge. Your father handled the paperwork, she said vaguely. He said it was all legal. How? The title was in my name. Another pause. Then, the words that hit me like a physical blow. He had a copy of your signature for emergencies. The implications slammed into me. My father hadn't just sold my car, he had forged my signature to transfer ownership. That wasn't just unfair, it was illegal. This is wrong, Mom, I said quietly, my voice raw with disbelief. You know it is. Don't be selfish, Olivia, she replied, her voice hardening. After everything we've done for you, the food, the roof over your head that I pay rent for. I interjected, my own voice rising. Family sacrifices for each other, she finished, using her familiar, infuriating refrain before hanging up. I sat stunned in the break room until Carolyn, the shift manager, poked her head in. Break's been over for 10 minutes, Olivia. Table 6 needs coffee refills. Mechanically, I stood, straightened my apron, and returned to the floor. For the next 4 hours, I moved through my shift like a ghost, taking orders, delivering food, collecting tips that would now go toward basic transportation, not my education. Several regular customers noticed my red eyes, but I deflected their concerns with practiced server smiles. At 7:30, I punched out, collected my purse from my locker, and stood at the diner's entrance, staring out at the rain that had begun falling. On any other day, I would have hurried to my car, cranked the heater, and enjoyed the brief sanctuary of my private space before driving home. Today, I pulled up my hood and stepped into the downpour, beginning the nearly 2-mile walk to my parents' house. Each raindrop mixed with the tears I finally allowed myself to shed. By the time I reached our suburban 2-story home, my uniform was soaked through, my waitress shoes squelched with every step, and my makeup had long since washed away. Through the dining room window, I could see them. My family, seated around our oak table, illuminated by the warm glow of our chandelier. Jake sat at the head of the table, Dad's usual place, wearing a Preston University sweatshirt that must have been purchased that day. Mom was setting down a large chocolate cake, my favorite, except the blue icing spelled out, "Congratulations, Jake." Extended family members and a few of Jake's friends filled the remaining chairs. A future Preston graduate banner hung on the wall. I stood in the rain, observing the scene for several long, agonizing minutes, feeling like an outsider looking in on a family that wasn't my own. No one had noticed my absence, or if they had, it hadn't interrupted their celebration. Today, my birthday, had been completely eclipsed. With a deep breath, I pushed open the front door. Conversation stalled as I stepped into the entryway, creating a puddle on the hardwood floor. "Olivia," Mom exclaimed, looking horrified at my appearance. "You're dripping all over the floor. Why didn't you call for a ride?" I stared at her, incredulous. "With what car, Mom?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the gathering. Jake's friends shifted awkwardly in their seats. "Where were you?" Dad demanded, as if I were late for Jake's celebration rather than returning from a 12-hour workday on my birthday. "Working, like I do every Tuesday, then walking home in the rain because someone sold my car." My voice remained eerily calm, cutting through the tension. Aunt Linda, seated near the kitchen doorway, looked between me and my father with confusion. "Robert, what is she talking about?" Dad cleared his throat, standing to take control of the situation. "This is hardly the time or place, Olivia. We have guests. Go change and join the celebration. Jake has exciting news." "I know the news," I replied, not moving from my spot. "Preston University. First semester's tuition is $5,800. Due this week. From me." Jake finally looked up from his phone, his expression showing the first hint of confusion. "Wait, what? I thought you said the college fund was covering it, Dad." "It is," Dad replied quickly, forcing a smile. "Your sister is just being dramatic. She's upset because we had to liquidate some assets." "You mean my car?" I challenged. "The car I bought with my own money. That asset." Uncle Thomas set down his fork. "Robert, did you sell Olivia's car without her permission?" "It was a family decision," Dad stated firmly. "No," I countered, stepping further into the dining room, water dripping from my clothes onto the beige carpet Mom was so proud of. "It wasn't. You didn't ask me. You didn't even tell me until after it was done." "I don't see what the big deal is," Jake interjected with a shrug. "You can just buy another one. You're always working anyway." That casual dismissal of 3 years of relentless sacrifice ignited something fierce inside me. "The big deal," I announced, my voice rising with each statement, "is that it was mine. Legally mine. Paid for with my money. Money I earned working 30-hour weeks while going to school full-time. And Dad forged my signature to sell it." Gasps erupted from several family members. Dad's face blanched. "That's a serious allegation," Uncle Thomas said quietly, his gaze fixed on my father. "It's the truth," I replied, looking directly at my father. Mom already confirmed it. All eyes turned to my mother, who suddenly became intensely interested in rearranging the cake plates. "It was an emergency situation," Dad insisted, trying to regain control. "As Olivia's parents, we have certain rights." "Not to my property," I interrupted. "I'm 25 years old. Living under our roof," Dad countered, his voice sharp, "eating our food. I pay rent." I shouted back. $400 a month to live in my childhood bedroom, plus groceries, plus utilities. Jake looked genuinely surprised by this information. Perhaps he had never questioned where the family money came from or went. "And now you expect me to pay nearly $6,000 for Jake's tuition? Money I've been saving to finish my own degree." Dad's expression hardened into one I recognized from childhood, the look that always preceded punishment. "Your brother has a future ahead of him. Preston will open doors. Your community college classes are just a hobby." The casual cruelty of that statement stunned the room into silence. Even Jake had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Robert," Aunt Linda said softly. "That's not fair." "Life isn't fair," Dad snapped back. "Family comes first. Olivia needs to understand her responsibility to this family." I felt something break inside me. Not in a destructive way, but as if chains I hadn't fully recognized were finally snapping. "I've been responsible to this family since I was 16, I said quietly, my voice eerily steady. "I've given you thousands of dollars. I've put my dreams on hold. I've worked jobs you would consider beneath you to contribute to this household." Dad waved dismissively. "Everyone works. Everyone contributes." "Does Jake?" I asked, looking at my brother. "Has he ever handed over his paychecks? Does he pay rent? Will he work through college like I do?" That's different, Mom interjected quickly. Jake needs to focus on his studies. And I don't. The injustice of it all crystallized in that moment. You've been taking from me for years while giving everything to him. We've given you a home. Dad shouted, his patience finally snapping. Ungrateful after everything we've done. I'm not giving you the money, I stated firmly, surprising even myself with my resolve. Not happening. The dining room went completely silent. Jake's friends stared at their plates. Relatives exchanged uncomfortable glances. Dad rose slowly from his chair, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Then pack your shit. You're dead to me. Mom gasped. Robert. I mean it, he continued, pointing toward the stairs. If you're not willing to support this family, you're no longer part of it. Get your things and get out tonight. In previous confrontations, this would have been the moment I backed down, apologized, agreed to his terms, surrendered my autonomy to maintain a semblance of peace. The familiar, crushing weight of guilt would have settled on my shoulders, and I would have convinced myself that family obligation trumped personal boundaries. Not tonight. Okay, I said simply. Dad blinked, clearly not expecting this response. Okay, what? Okay, I'll pack. I'll leave. I turned toward the stairs, then paused to address the shocked faces around the table. And Jake, congratulations on Preston. I hope it's worth it. As I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, I heard the confused murmurs erupt below. Mom's plaintive, Robert, do something, and Dad's dismissive, she'll calm down and apologize. They didn't know that something fundamental had changed. The daughter who always gave in, who always sacrificed, who always prioritized family harmony over personal dignity, that person had finally reached her absolute breaking point. In my bedroom, I pulled my largest suitcase from under the bed and began methodically emptying my dresser drawers. The shock of my decision hadn't fully registered yet. Instead, I operated with a strange, calm clarity. The sound of the ongoing celebration drifted upstairs, awkward at first, then resuming as if my departure were merely a momentary disruption rather than a family-altering event. I heard Jake's laugh, followed by Dad's booming voice recounting some Preston University trivia he'd undoubtedly memorized. That day, I packed efficiently, selecting clothes appropriate for job interviews and work, leaving behind high school memorabilia and items too bulky to transport. When the first suitcase filled, I retrieved a duffel bag from my closet and continued. My essential documents would be crucial for establishing independence. I opened my desk drawer where I kept my social security card, passport, and birth certificate, only to find it conspicuously empty. A cold, dreadful realization washed over me. Dad had taken my documents, likely after selling my car, anticipating potential resistance. Without these papers, finding new housing or employment would be significantly more difficult. I took out my phone and texted Aunt Linda, "Can you come upstairs? Need to talk privately." While waiting, I continued packing toiletries and electronics. My laptop, thankfully, had always stayed with me at work or school, safe from family redistribution. A soft knock at the door preceded Aunt Linda's concerned face. She slipped inside, closing the door behind her. "Olivia, what's happening?" she asked, eyeing my half-packed suitcases. "Dad sold my car without permission, forged my signature, and now wants me to pay for Jake's tuition with my savings," I summarized. When I refused, he told me to leave, so I'm leaving. Aunt Linda sat heavily on my bed. "This isn't right," she murmured. "Where will you go?" "I can stay with my friend Amanda temporarily," I replied, continuing to pack. "But I need your help. Dad's taken my important documents, birth certificate, social security card, and I'm worried about what else he might have done." Her expression darkened. "What do you mean?" "Uncle Thomas mentioned something at Christmas about Dad's finances not adding up, and Dad's always insisted on helping with my paperwork, taxes, even my student loan applications." Aunt Linda hesitated, then spoke quietly. "I've had concerns for years. Your father has always been controlling with money, even as a child, but recently he's borrowed money from me 3 times, substantial amounts, with vague explanations about temporary shortfalls. This new information confirmed my growing suspicions. "I need to check something," I said, moving toward the door. "Can you keep packing for me?" I'll be right back. Downstairs, the party continued, oblivious, in the dining room. I slipped quietly into Dad's home office, a room we were generally forbidden to enter without permission. The desk drawer where he kept financial documents was locked, but I knew from childhood snooping that he kept the key taped under the desk blotter. The key was exactly where I remembered. I opened the drawer and began quickly photographing documents with my phone. Bank statements, credit card bills, loan applications. What I found confirmed my worst fears. My name appeared on credit card statements for accounts I'd never opened. Loan documents bore my signature, or rather, a disturbingly good facsimile, on dates when I had been working verifiable shifts at the diner. My social security number appeared on financial records for transactions I'd never authorized. Identity theft. By my own father. He was using my good credit to finance what appeared to be mounting gambling debts, according to bank withdrawals at ATMs located in or near casinos. I also found statements for Jake's college fund, an account that had been nearly depleted long before his acceptance to Preston. The truth was becoming horrifyingly clear. There was no money for Jake's tuition because Dad had spent it, and now he expected me to fill the gaping hole. I quickly created digital copies of everything, emailing them to myself and to Aunt Linda for safekeeping. Then, making a crucial decision, I wrote a detailed letter explaining what I discovered, including photographs of the forged documents and unauthorized accounts. I made 3 copies, one to leave behind, one for Aunt Linda and one for Uncle Thomas, whose accounting background would be invaluable in navigating the financial fraud aspects. When I returned to my room, Aunt Linda had nearly finished packing my remaining clothes. I found something, I said, showing her the evidence on my phone. Dad's been using my identity to open credit accounts. There are loans in my name I never took out. Aunt Linda's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. I'm leaving copies of everything I found, I explained, handing her one of the packets. This explains why he was so desperate for me to pay Jake's tuition. There is no college fund. There probably hasn't been for years. You need to report this, Aunt Linda said firmly. This is criminal fraud, Olivia, even if he is your father. I nodded, the weight of this step not lost on me. I know, but first I need to get out of here safely. Can you give this to Uncle Thomas? I handed her the 3rd packet. And can you call me an Uber? I don't have access to my car anymore. While Aunt Linda ordered the ride, I texted Amanda, emergency. Need place to stay tonight. We'll explain everything. Her response was immediate, doors open. Wine's ready. I did a final sweep of my room, ensuring I had everything essential. My gaze lingered on the birthday cards on my dresser, none from my immediate family, all from coworkers and friends. I tucked them into my bag as reminders that some people in my life valued me properly. The Uber app showed my ride was 5 minutes away. It was time to face my parents one last time. Downstairs, the party had moved to the living room. Jake was laughing, opening congratulatory cards, exclaiming over the checks inside each one. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. Money freely given to Jake, while mine was taken without consent. I'm leaving now, I announced from the entryway, suitcases beside me. Mom looked up, genuine shock on her face, as if she hadn't truly believed I would follow through. Olivia, don't be ridiculous. Where would you even go? That's not your concern anymore, I replied calmly. But before I go, you should know I've discovered what Dad's been doing with my identity and credit. Dad's face blanched visibly. Jake stopped opening cards. I don't know what you're talking about, Dad bluffed, but his expression betrayed him. The credit cards, the loans, all in my name, all without my knowledge, I continued. I've documented everything, including the forged signatures. Dad stood abruptly. Now listen here. No, you listen, I interrupted. I've made copies of everything. I'm leaving one here. I placed the envelope on the entryway table. What happens next depends on how you handle this situation. Are you threatening me? Dad's voice rose dangerously. I'm giving you an opportunity to make things right, I corrected, starting with my car and my documents. Mom approached cautiously. Honey, let's talk about this rationally. Family problems should stay within the family. This stopped being a family problem when Dad committed identity theft, I replied, my voice steady despite the tremor inside. But I'm willing to handle this privately if my car is returned and all fraudulent accounts in my name are closed and paid off. Dad's face cycled through emotions: anger, fear, calculation. You've always been dramatic. No one will believe you over me. The documentation speaks for itself, I replied as my phone buzzed with the Uber's arrival notification. You have until tomorrow to decide how you want to proceed. Mom grabbed my arm. Please don't do this. Not on Jake's special day. The mention of Jake's celebration on my forgotten birthday was the final, stinging straw. I gently removed her hand. It's my special day, too, Mom. I turned 25 today. But I guess that wasn't worth remembering. Aunt Linda appeared beside me, taking one of my bags. I'll walk you out, Olivia. As we turned to leave, Mom called out, if you walk out that door, don't expect to be welcomed back. I paused at the threshold. I never truly was welcomed here, Mom. I was tolerated as long as I was useful. Dad remained silent, likely calculating the potential consequences of my discoveries. Jake looked utterly confused, his perfect world of privilege beginning to show cracks. Without another word, I walked out into the night, leaving behind the house that had never truly been a home, and the family that had never truly respected me as an individual. The Uber driver loaded my bags into the trunk as Aunt Linda hugged me tightly. I'm proud of you, she whispered. Call me tomorrow. We'll figure this out together. As the car pulled away, I watched my childhood home recede in the rear window. The packet of evidence I'd left behind would be discovered by morning, and the consequences would begin to unfold. For the first time in years, despite the daunting uncertainty ahead, I felt something close to freedom. Amanda's one-bedroom apartment welcomed me with the promised glass of wine and a pull-out couch already made up with fresh sheets. Her eyes widened as I recounted the evening's events, the evidence I discovered, the ultimatum I delivered. Holy shit, she whispered when I finished. Your dad's been stealing your identity? That's like actual prison time fraud. I know, I replied, the full weight of the situation finally hitting me. The controlled calm that had carried me through the confrontation dissolved, and I broke down in tears. Years of manipulation, gaslighting, and exploitation poured out as Amanda held me, her own righteous anger evident in her tense shoulders. You did the right thing, she repeated like a mantra. They left you no choice. Eventually, exhaustion claimed me, and I fell into a dreamless sleep on Amanda's pull-out couch, my phone silenced after a barrage of texts from my mother, alternating between guilt trips and pleas to work things out privately. Morning arrived with sunlight filtering through Amanda's thin curtains and the stark reality of my new situation. I was essentially homeless, with limited savings, thankfully in an account Dad couldn't access, no transportation, and a monumental family crisis unfolding. But for the first time in years, I felt clear-headed about my value and my boundaries. My phone showed 17 missed calls, 10 from Mom, 4 from Dad, 2 from Jake, and 1 from Aunt Linda. Numerous text notifications cluttered my screen, but I ignored them all for the moment, needing coffee before facing the fallout. Amanda had already left for her morning shift, leaving a note with her spare key and instructions to make yourself at home. I showered, dressed in clean clothes, and finally steeled myself to check messages. Mom's texts escalated from, please call us immediately, to, how could you do this to your father, to, we raised you better than this. Dad's were terse demands to return home immediately to discuss this misunderstanding. Jake's single text read, WTF is happening. Dad's freaking out. Aunt Linda's message was different, met with Thomas this morning. He's reviewed everything. Call when you're ready. We're with you. I called her immediately. She answered on the first ring. Are you safe? She asked without preamble. Yes, staying with a friend, I assured her. Have you heard from them this morning? Oh yes, she replied grimly. Your father's been calling everyone in the family with his version of events. Claims you're having some kind of breakdown, making wild accusations because you're jealous of Jake. Of course he is, I sighed. And Uncle Thomas, what did he think of the documents? He's furious, Aunt Linda said. Says it's textbook identity theft and fraud. The forged signatures are especially damning. He's prepared to help you file reports if that's what you want. We arranged to meet at Uncle Thomas's office at 11. I spent the interim hours making lists of immediate needs, new copies of vital documents, credit monitoring services, secure housing, reliable transportation. The 25-minute walk to Uncle Thomas's downtown accounting firm gave me time to organize my thoughts. The crisp October air felt cleansing after years of the suffocating atmosphere at home. Uncle Thomas welcomed me with an uncharacteristic hug before ushering me into his private office. Aunt Linda was already seated along with a woman introduced as Patricia Logan, a lawyer friend of Uncle Thomas who specialized in identity theft cases. "I've reviewed the documentation you provided," Uncle Thomas began without preamble. "It's extensive and concerning. Your father has opened 3 credit cards and 2 personal loans in your name totaling just over $27,000 in debt." The figure staggered me. How did he get away with this for so long? "He had access to your mail, your personal information, and enough knowledge of your schedule to intercept any communications from these financial institutions," Patricia explained. "And he likely counted on your family loyalty to prevent you from reporting him if you did discover the fraud. Which brings us to the difficult question," Uncle Thomas said gently. "How do you want to proceed?" "There are several options, each with different consequences." Patricia outlined my choices. I could report the fraud to the police and credit bureaus, potentially resulting in criminal charges against my father. I could attempt to negotiate privately, having him transfer the debts to his name and return my property. Or I could accept the debts as my own to avoid family conflict. "That last option is absolutely not happening," I stated firmly. "These aren't my debts. I won't pay for his fraud." "Good," Aunt Linda nodded approvingly. "You shouldn't have to." "I'd like to try the middle path first," I decided after consideration. "Give him one chance to make this right without legal consequences, but I want everything in writing and I want it done immediately." "A reasonable approach," Patricia agreed. "I can draft a formal letter outlining the evidence we have and the terms for avoiding legal action." While Patricia worked on the letter, Uncle Thomas helped me begin the process of securing my finances and identity. We froze my credit with all 3 major bureaus, established new accounts at a different bank, and compiled a list of all the fraudulent accounts that needed addressing. "There's something else you should know," Uncle Thomas said hesitantly. "Your father has apparently been mishandling finances beyond just your identity. He borrowed $8,000 from me last year for Jake's college fund, money that clearly wasn't used for that purpose. And $12,000 from me in 3 separate loans," Aunt Linda added. "Always with urgent family reasons that couldn't be discussed in detail." A disturbing picture was emerging. "He has a gambling problem, doesn't he?" I asked, remembering the casino ATM withdrawals I'd seen in his financial records. Uncle Thomas nodded grimly. "The evidence points that way. There are regular cash withdrawals at locations near Riverside Casino, and some of the credit card statements show cash advances with the same geolocation." This explains why he was so desperate for me to cover Jake's tuition, I realized. "He's probably burned through any actual college savings, which makes his treatment of you even more reprehensible," Aunt Linda said angrily. "Using your good credit and hard work to cover for his addiction, then trying to force you to finance Jake's education when the money he'd set aside was gone." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Amanda. "Your brother just showed up at the diner asking for you. He looks freaked out." What should I tell him? I hesitated, then replied, "If he's alone, you can give him your address. If Dad's with him, tell him I'm not working today." Amanda confirmed Jake was alone, and I informed Aunt Linda and Uncle Thomas that we might have an additional participant in our discussion soon. While we waited, Patricia returned with the drafted letter. It outlined in clinical terms the evidence of identity theft, the specific accounts fraudulently opened in my name, and the terms for avoiding criminal charges, immediate return of my car or its cash equivalent at fair market value, return of all my personal documents, closure and transfer of all fraudulent accounts to my father's name, and a formal acknowledgement of the wrongdoing. "This is excellent," I said after reading it. "Clear and non-negotiable." A knock at the office door interrupted us. Uncle Thomas opened it to reveal Jake, looking disheveled and confused, still wearing his Preston University sweatshirt from the previous night. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, then noticed the others in the room. Aunt Linda, Uncle Thomas? Why is everyone acting weird? Dad's having some kind of meltdown and Mom won't stop crying. Sit down, Jake, I said calmly. There's a lot you don't know about our family finances. Over the next hour, we explained the situation to my brother, showing him the evidence of our father's fraud and gambling. His initial defensiveness, Dad wouldn't do that, gradually gave way to shocked understanding as the documentation made the truth undeniable. So, there's no college fund? He finally asked in a small voice. And he sold your car illegally to make the tuition deposit? That's the situation, Uncle Thomas confirmed. Your sister has been subsidizing the family for years while your father mismanaged and gambled away funds. Jake sat quietly, processing. I expected anger, denial, perhaps accusations that I was exaggerating. Instead, he looked up with genuine remorse. I had no idea, he said quietly. All these years I thought. You just assumed what you were told. I finished for him. We all did. Dad's very convincing. Jake straightened suddenly. We need to go home now. Dad was talking crazy this morning. Something about fixing this before it goes too far. I didn't understand then, but now I was worried. Patricia handed me the formal letter. If you're going to confront him, take this. And remember, you're negotiating from a position of strength. You have evidence of criminal activity. Aunt Linda insisted on driving us. On the way, Jake filled us in on the chaos that had erupted after I left. Dad went ballistic when he read what you left behind, he explained. Started shredding papers, deleting emails. Mom kept asking what was happening, and he just kept saying he'd handled things the only way he could. This morning, he was on the phone with some loan shark-sounding guy, promising payment by tonight. The picture became clearer. Dad's gambling debts had likely extended beyond legitimate financial institutions. My departure and evidence had triggered full-blown panic. When we arrived at the house, the scene was eerily quiet. Mom answered the door, her eyes red-rimmed and weary. He's in his office, she said without greeting. He hasn't come out since Jake left. Jake and I exchanged concerned glances. Aunt Linda stepped forward. Diana, we need to talk, all of us together. Robert has created a serious situation that affects the entire family. Mom's defensive posture crumbled slightly. I don't understand what's happening, she admitted. Robert won't explain anything properly. He just keeps saying Olivia is trying to ruin our family. That's not true, I said firmly. I'm trying to protect myself from fraud he committed against me. There's a difference. We moved into the living room where I briefly outlined the situation for Mom, whose expression shifted from skepticism to horror as Jake and Aunt Linda confirmed the details. I didn't know, she whispered repeatedly. He handles all the finances. He always has. That's part of the problem, Uncle Thomas said gently. Total financial control is a form of abuse, Diana. Dad's office door remained closed despite the voices in the living room. Finally, Jake knocked firmly. Dad, we need to talk, all of us, about everything. Silence. Jake tried the handle. It's locked. A cold dread settled in my stomach. Dad, I called. We have a proposal for handling this situation. More silence. Mom found the spare key, her hands trembling as she handed it to Jake. He unlocked the door to reveal Dad hunched over his desk, frantically shredding documents. It's too late, he said without looking up. You've ruined everything. A whirlwind of legal consultations, financial damage control, and painful family reckonings consumed the next week. I stayed with Amanda, whose tiny apartment became my sanctuary as the situation with my family unfolded in increasingly dramatic fashion. The morning after our confrontation, Aunt Linda called with a vivid description of the scene at my parents' house. According to her account, the evidence I'd left behind had triggered a complete meltdown. Your mom was crying in the kitchen when I arrived, she reported. Your uncle was in the driveway screaming into his phone about fiscal responsibility and family betrayal. And your father, this is the part you won't believe. Your father was literally on the front porch begging the neighbors for a loan to cover some urgent debt. The family's financial house of cards had collapsed spectacularly. With my departure and the exposed fraud, Dad could no longer maintain the precarious juggling act of debts, lies, and manipulations. His desperation had reached such a point that he'd abandoned all dignity, approaching neighbors with increasingly implausible stories about temporary financial emergencies. "What about Mom?" I asked in shock. "I think," Aunt Linda replied. She kept saying she had no idea how bad things were. "I believe her, actually. Your father kept her as financially ignorant as he could." The full extent of Dad's financial mismanagement became clearer as Uncle Thomas delved deeper into the records I'd photographed. Beyond the identity theft involving my name, Dad had accumulated gambling debts to less than reputable lenders, taken cash advances on maxed-out credit cards to pay other credit cards, and systematically drained not only Jake's college fund, but also his and Mom's retirement accounts. "It's a textbook case of financial addiction," Uncle Thomas explained during one of our daily update calls. He created an unsustainable cycle that required increasingly desperate measures to maintain. The car situation resolved first. After receiving Patricia's formal letter outlining potential criminal charges, Dad provided contact information for the buyer, a poker buddy who'd purchased my Toyota well below market value, knowing something was suspicious about the transaction. With Uncle Thomas accompanying me as a witness, I confronted the buyer with evidence that the sale was fraudulent. "Look, I don't want legal trouble," the man said, clearly uncomfortable. "How about I return the car to you for what I paid? For $1,000 cash." "The Blue Book value is $7,200, Uncle Thomas countered firmly. After tense negotiation, we settled on the return of my car, plus $2,000 compensation for the inconvenience. Not the full value, but a significant improvement over the complete loss I'd faced a week earlier. My personal documents reappeared on Amanda's doorstep in a manila envelope 3 days after the confrontation, delivered by Jake without comment. My birth certificate, social security card, passport, and even my high school diploma were all included, extracted from wherever Dad had hidden them. The fraudulent accounts proved more complicated. Patricia helped me file formal identity theft reports with each creditor, providing the evidence of forged signatures. Most initially pushed back, requiring police reports before proceeding. "This is where you need to decide how far you're willing to go," Patricia advised during a consultation in her downtown office. "Filing police reports means your father could face criminal charges. Identity theft involving this amount of money could mean jail time." I struggled with this decision, the residual programming of family loyalty battling with the clear need for justice and financial protection. In the end, a development from Jake made the decision for me. My brother appeared at Amanda's apartment unannounced 5 days after the initial confrontation, looking pale and determined. "Dad's been using my identity, too," he announced without preamble. I checked my credit report like Uncle Thomas suggested. There are 2 credit cards I never opened. This revelation cemented my resolve. The exploitation hadn't been limited to me. Jake had simply been kept in the dark about his role in Dad's schemes, protected by his golden child status until Dad's financial desperation grew extreme. Together, we filed the necessary police reports. Detective Sarah Guzman was assigned to our case. Her matter-of-fact approach was a relief after days of emotional family drama. "Unfortunately, these cases are increasingly common," she explained as we provided statements. "Family members are the most common perpetrators of identity theft because they have easy access to personal information and often believe family ties will prevent reporting." With police reports in hand, the credit card companies and lenders began the process of removing the fraudulent accounts from my credit history. The debt wouldn't disappear. Dad would still owe the money, but my name and credit score would be disentangled from his financial misconduct. A week after my departure, Jake called to report that Preston University had rescinded his acceptance. After the tuition deposit check bounced, his dream school was no longer an option. "I'm actually relieved," he confessed, surprising me. "I've been thinking about everything. How you worked while I got everything handed to me. How unfair it's all been." "It wasn't your fault," I said, finding forgiveness easier than expected. "You didn't create the system." "No, but I benefited from it," he acknowledged. "And I never questioned it. I'm going to enroll at the community college for now, get a job, maybe transfer to state next year if I can earn a scholarship." His maturity in facing this setback suggested he might grow from this family crisis in unexpectedly positive ways. Mom's reaction evolved throughout the week. Initial texts blaming me for destroying our family gave way to confused questions about financial matters she'd never been allowed to understand. By day 5, she called with a different tone entirely. "I've made an appointment with a financial advisor," she said hesitantly. "And I've applied for a part-time job at the library. I need to learn to stand on my own." "That's great, Mom," I replied, genuinely proud of this step toward independence. "Your father isn't handling things well," she continued. "He's angry. Blames everyone but himself. Says if the family had just supported him a little longer, he could have fixed everything." The classic justification of the addict. Just one more chance. One more cover-up. One more enabling act from family members. I recognized the manipulation tactic for what it was. There was nothing to fix, Mom. The system was broken from the start. He was taking and taking without plan or permission. "I see that," she admitted quietly. "I should have questioned things sooner." Dad's response to the unfolding consequences came 7 days after my departure. As the police investigation proceeded and creditors began contacting him directly about the fraudulent accounts, his desperate attempts to regain control became increasingly transparent. First came angry texts accusing me of betrayal and ingratitude. When these received no response, he shifted to appeals for family unity and vague promises to make everything right if I'd just call off the investigation. When these two were ignored, he appeared at Amanda's apartment building, demanding to speak with me. Amanda refused him entry, and he eventually left after threatening to tell everyone what you've done. The ultimate attempt at reconciliation came in the form of a rambling email sent to me, Jake, Mom, Aunt Linda, and Uncle Thomas simultaneously. "I've only ever tried to provide for this family. Everything I did was for all of you. The gambling was just to try to solve temporary cash flow problems. If everyone had just trusted me a little longer, I could have fixed everything. Now you've destroyed our family over money. Is that really worth it? Olivia, I'm your father. I gave you life. I put a roof over your head. And this is how you repay me? By turning your brother against me? By embarrassing me in front of the neighbors? By involving the police in private family matters? I'm begging you to reconsider this path. We can work this out privately. Family should come first." The manipulation was so transparent now that I could only feel sad at how predictable it was. The man who had controlled our family through financial abuse and emotional manipulation for decades couldn't understand why his tactics were no longer working. I didn't reply. Neither did Jake or Uncle Thomas. Mom sent a brief response. "I've consulted with my own lawyer. Please direct future communications through her office." By the end of that first week, I had secured my own apartment with Aunt Linda as guarantor, since my credit history was still in recovery. The studio was small, but entirely mine. The first living space I'd ever had without parental oversight or obligation. My first paycheck after the confrontation went into my new, secure bank account, every dollar mine to allocate as I saw fit. The freedom was dizzying after years of surrendering significant portions of my income to family obligations. Amanda helped me move in, arranging my meager possessions in the compact space. "It's not much," I apologized, looking around at the sparse furnishings, a second-hand bed, a small table with 2 chairs, a bookshelf made of cinder blocks and boards. "It's everything," she corrected me with a smile. "It's yours. On your terms." And she was right. The studio wasn't just a physical space, it was a declaration of independence, a tangible manifestation of my reclaimed autonomy. That evening, sitting alone in my new apartment, I recognized the complex emotions swirling within me, relief at escaping the exploitative dynamics, guilt that still surfaced despite my best efforts, anger at the years of manipulation, grief for the supportive family I'd never truly had, and an unexpected, powerful sense of pride in finally establishing boundaries. The path forward wasn't entirely clear, but for the first time in my adult life, I was the one determining the direction. 6 months after walking away from my parents' house in the rain, my life had transformed in ways both practical and profound. The studio apartment I'd initially rented had become a true home, small, but arranged exactly as I wanted, decorated with secondhand treasures that reflected my actual tastes rather than family expectations. My career trajectory had shifted significantly after Aunt Linda recommended me for an administrative position at her friend's legal office. The steady hours and professional environment were a welcome change from the physically demanding diner work, though I still picked up occasional weekend shifts at Mabel's to accelerate my savings. The law firm's educational assistance program even offered partial tuition reimbursement, allowing me to resume my business classes with less financial strain. "You're a natural at client relations," my supervisor commented during my 3-month review. "Have you considered paralegal certification?" The firm would support that career path. For the first time, I could envision a professional future based on my skills and interests rather than immediate financial survival. The breathing room created by fair compensation and reasonable working conditions allowed me to think beyond the next rent payment or car repair. That car, my reclaimed Toyota, had been replaced with a slightly newer Honda, purchased entirely in my name with a legitimate auto loan that was building my restored credit. The transaction had been straightforward and transparent, a refreshing contrast to the tangled financial manipulations of my family. My relationship with my immediate family had evolved into carefully structured interactions. Dad faced legal consequences for the identity theft, ultimately accepting a plea deal that included probation, mandatory financial counseling, and restitution payments. The criminal record had cost him his sales management position, a consequence he still blamed me for rather than his own actions. I maintained no direct contact with him, a boundary that occasionally triggered guilt but increasingly felt like necessary protection. Mom had reached out repeatedly, her messages evolving from guilt-inducing pleas to more respectful communication as she established her own independence. Our first in-person meeting after the confrontation occurred 3 months later at a neutral coffee shop. She arrived looking both older and somehow more present, the passive enabler role visibly falling away as she navigated life with agency. "I filed for legal separation," she announced without preamble. "The financial counselor helped me see how unhealthy our relationship has been." "That's a big step," I acknowledged, surprised but supportive. "How are you managing practically?" "I'm working 30 hours a week at the library now," she said with a hint of pride. "And I've moved into a small apartment near work. Your father is still in the house trying to sell it to pay debts." We established a tentative new relationship, not the automatic closeness assumed by family ties, but a growing mutual respect between adults who shared history but now chose their level of involvement. Our weekly phone calls were brief, but increasingly genuine, no longer shadowed by unspoken expectations of sacrifice or obligation. Jake's transformation had been perhaps the most surprising development. The entitled teenager had been replaced by a surprisingly grounded young adult, navigating significant disappointment with unexpected resilience. "Community college isn't what I expected," he admitted during one of our monthly lunch meetings, "but Professor Wilson's business ethics class is actually incredible. I'm thinking about majoring in accounting now, maybe with a focus on fraud prevention." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. His first-hand experience with our father's financial misconduct had sparked an interest in preventing similar situations for others. Jake had secured a part-time job at a local bookstore, paying his own expenses for the first time and learning financial management from Uncle Thomas. Our sibling relationship, previously defined by the unequal family system that privileged him, evolved into something more balanced and genuine. "I still can't believe how blind I was," he said during a rare, vulnerable moment. "All those years you were working while I just took and took." "You were a kid following the family script," I reminded him. "We all were." Therapy had become an essential part of my healing journey, helping me recognize and challenge the deeply ingrained patterns of guilt, obligation, and self-sacrifice that had allowed the exploitation to continue for so long. "Family systems like yours create powerful conditioning," Dr. Melissa explained during one session. "The expectation that you should set yourself on fire to keep others warm doesn't disappear overnight." Slowly, I learned to recognize the difference between healthy generosity and harmful self-neglect. The voice that automatically responded yes to every request, regardless of personal cost, grew quieter, replaced by thoughtful consideration of my own needs and boundaries. Uncle Thomas continued providing financial guidance as I rebuilt my credit and established healthy money management habits. His matter-of-fact approach to financial education filled gaps deliberately created by my father's controlling behavior. Financial literacy is a form of self-defense, he explained while helping me create my first actual budget, especially for women who are often discouraged from fully understanding money. Aunt Linda remained my most consistent support, having recognized the unhealthy family dynamics long before I had the language or perspective to identify them. Her weekly dinner invitations provided not just meals, but modeling of what healthy family relationships could look like. "I always saw myself in you," she confided one evening. "The responsible one, the giver. I spent decades trying to earn your father's approval before I realized it was a game designed for me to lose." As my birthday approached again, my 26th, marking 1 year since the confrontation, I found myself reflecting on the painful but necessary journey of the past 12 months. The celebration I planned bore no resemblance to previous years' forgotten or hijacked occasions. I reserved a private room at my favorite restaurant and invited the people who had supported my transformation: Amanda, Aunt Linda, Uncle Thomas, my therapist Dr. Melissa, coworkers from both jobs, and even Jake and Mom. With clear communication that this invitation didn't extend to Dad. Surrounded by people who respected my boundaries and celebrated my growth, I recognized how fundamentally my understanding of family had shifted. The automatic obligation based on genetic connection had been replaced by chosen connections based on mutual respect and genuine care. "I'd like to make a toast," Aunt Linda said, raising her glass. "To Olivia, who had the courage to walk away from what was hurting her and toward what could heal her." The applause and genuine affection in the room represented a form of wealth I hadn't previously recognized: relationships based on choice rather than obligation, on mutual support rather than one-sided sacrifice. Later that evening, returning to my apartment alone but not lonely, I reflected on the painful lessons of the past year. The journey from exploitation to autonomy had required facing difficult truths: that those who claimed to love me had systematically taken advantage of my sense of duty, that family first had been weaponized to extract compliance, that genuine love doesn't demand constant self-sacrifice. The hardest lesson had been learning that forgiveness didn't necessarily mean reconciliation. I could release the anger and resentment toward my father without inviting further harm into my life. I could acknowledge the complex reality that he had both genuinely loved his children and exploited them to serve his addiction and control needs. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely. There were still moments of grief for the supportive family I'd never truly had. Still occasional pangs of program guilt when I prioritized my needs. But these reactions no longer controlled my decisions or defined my worth. As I prepared for bed, my phone displayed a text from an unknown number. "Happy birthday, Olivia. I hope someday you'll understand everything I did was for this family. Dad." 6 months earlier, this message would have triggered hours of agonizing defensiveness or attempts to explain my perspective. Tonight, I simply acknowledged the contact without responding, recognizing it as an attempt to re-establish the old dynamics rather than create healthy new ones. True healing wasn't about convincing those who had hurt me to recognize their actions. It was about creating a life where their recognition wasn't necessary for my peace. The boundaries I'd established weren't walls built from resentment, but rather healthy perimeters protecting the new life I was building. A life based on mutual respect, clear communication, and the radical notion that my worth wasn't measured by how much I sacrificed for others. The next morning, I woke to sunshine streaming through curtains I had chosen in an apartment I had earned, surrounded by possessions that were securely mine. The day ahead included work I found meaningful, classes advancing my chosen career path, and connections with people who valued me as a complete person rather than a resource to be exploited. This, I realized, was the true definition of wealth. Not financial abundance, but the freedom to build a life aligned with my authentic values. The painful journey from exploitation to autonomy had ultimately led to something precious: the space to discover who I truly was beyond the family-assigned role of perpetual provider. As I moved forward, I carried this understanding like a compass, that family should be the people who help you become more fully yourself, not those who demand you diminish yourself to serve their needs. And sometimes, the most profound act of self-love is simply walking away from those who cannot see your worth beyond what you can give them.